All right, Mr. Markham.
Thank you. And I'll try to make my way through the comments. I'll try to take as many notes as possible. First of all, just going to the last speaker, this is not a high-density apartment project. This is basically, we are about slightly over 6 units to the acre in a density range of 5 to 8 units per acre that's allowed within the general plan as far as the medium-high density residential designation. That designation has been in place since 1989 with the Southwest Area Plan. It was perpetuated in 2003 by the county general plan, was perpetuated once again when the county adopted the roundtable plan for the city of Wildomar just prior to incorporation in February 2008. We're not asking for a general plan amendment. We're not asking for an increase in density. We're asking to be allowed to develop consistent with the general plan, i.e. the consistency zone change case. So we're not asking for anything bigger or more than what's out there today. It is not an apartment project. It is not a high density apartment project. It is literally at the lowest, it is the lowest density range that is any attached housing is allowed in the general plan, just FYI. Basically all of our efforts have been to mitigate to the greatest extent possible our impacts on our neighbors to the south. We've heard that loud and long. The very first thing we did when we came in immediately after pre-application review with the city before we made formal submittal, we went to the city of Murrieta. We met with their public works and planning folks. They had 2 requests of us. They had number 1, this was a different project at that time. The units basically faced the long way to the south. The city planners and engineering folks asked us to turn the buildings so they were in view, not a facing view. They also asked us the minimum setbacks are 10 feet in the zone. They asked us to increase that. We increased it to 20 feet, which is what we went forward to the first 2 community meetings with. So we acknowledge that. We have subsequently had basically an informal ad hoc meeting, if you will, between 2 members of your council and 2 members of the City of Murrieta Council at the City of Murrieta's request. We met with them. We provided them with what was going to Planning Commission. We provided them with what was going to Second Planning Commission, and we provided them with what was coming to you tonight. So we've kept them informed each step of the way. Basically, to talk about individual issues, this property is yes, it's zoned rural residential. Rural residential, this is the old county holding zone, which basically everything was zoned until it was zoned consistent with the general plan. If the city of Wildomar had the resources to do consistency zoning, they would be zoned, the property would have been zoned R3, just like the city of Murrieta did consistency zone on their entire city when they adopted their development code in 1997 after they adopted their general plan in 1994. With regard to the general plan, the Jefferson connection to Palomar was on the Murrieta general plan. They changed it. Actually, Washington was supposed to be the predominant street. Murrieta wanted to change to Jefferson. That's why you see the alignment that you have out there today. The county then honored that in 2003 with their general plan, and they changed the general plan through this area to basically match up with Murrieta's general plan. Again, there was no change to the circulation element in 2008 for the roundtable plan. So basically the circulation element has been in place effectively since 1994 when Murrieta modified theirs and then was effectively mirrored by the county in 2003. So that is not a change. And as you've seen from Mr. Evatt's presentation, the roadways that we will be building effectively 60 out of the 80 feet of pavement on Jefferson and Palomar. And then in addition to that, we will be building full width on a portion of Washington and basically half width plus another 12 feet on our side of Washington down to the Murrieta boundary. The roads track, as it's referred to on the west side, will be building the other half of the road. We are committing to a condition modification that we will build our half of the road all the way up to the drainage culvert, to the north side of the drainage culvert. We are accepting that as a condition. We've heard the comments loud and clear. That's why the latest revision that we made, and I think I provided you with an example of what the mesh would look like, the 75% opaque mesh, that we would go in and do that as the very first thing we would do before we start any grading construction, any other construction, that we would basically go in and build this mesh screen along the entire boundary to where basically even the construction workers working on this project, other than the ones installing the mesh, installing the post and the wire and for the mesh. And we can certainly notice the neighbors when that would take place, so that they can basically be aware of that and take that into consideration. Probably be a few day effort. That will be the very first thing we do. And then also we're committing to, we would build the slope and the wall, the green wall, and the first row of trees as our very first phase of development. And then that we would commit that those 10 buildings would be our very last phase of physical building construction. And we stand by that and certainly accept that as a condition of approval. There was a comment that Mr. Mays made about the about bus service and bike lanes. We do have, is a bike trail and trail system that we worked out between the 3 developments, between the church and ourselves and Rhodes and Mr. Williams across the street, with how that will basically get over to Murrieta Creek on the portion of the road improvements. And we are consistent with that. The RTA, to the best of my knowledge, has not requested a bus stop or has not requested a bus shelter or turnout of anything. If they had requested it, we would certainly have honored that request. Basically, we do have Mr. Andre's comment about lack of entry monuments. We have entry monuments at both entries. The project will be gated. We do have the adequate turnarounds for the reject lanes, but there is a monument there on both sides of both entrances, both on Washington and on Palomar Jefferson. Basically, it's an interesting comparison, comparing us to the Mission Trail project in Elsinore. It is an affordable housing project. It is a subsidized affordable housing project. This is not an affordable housing project. This is a market for sale project, and I'm not really sure how to even compare the two. And since that is adjacent to Summerlee, it is, I think, a project that was approved by Elsinore just recently on their land, and as far as I know, there were no objections to that project when it went forward. It is an entirely different project than what is presented to you tonight as a town home for sale project. And again, we can only stand by. I can tell you that everything that Mr. Valdez has presented, both at Planning Commission, where we had views looking out the windows and views from the backyard looking up at these units, is digitally accurate. He has taken into account the buildings which are digitized, the design topo which is digitized, and has basically looked at that in both directions. Now we have lopped off that first building to give us another 15 plus feet of setback. And even on Mr. Kinsey's portion of the site, we've actually bumped that up another 4 and another 2 feet on those 2 buildings at the bottom. That, and also we've added the wall, added the berm. We now have a 10-foot barrier between ourselves and our neighbors to the south. We stand by the digital accuracy of those plans. I think your staff has reviewed our grading plans, has reviewed our design, and basically concurs that the design meets the development code criteria. Basically, going forward and looking at additional, Ms. Miller's contention that somehow this hillside is in the floodplain. I'm not really sure how that would work. We are not in a floodplain. I can guarantee you that. We do have a drainage course that runs through the site, which we will be connecting over through Mr. Williams and the church property over, and the roads project over to the existing inlet for that storm drain system. We have analyzed the noise and the construction noise. We will have construction noise mitigation measures along that entire south boundary, which we would actually add to that screen wall. And basically, I think that pretty much sums it up from our perspective. I think your staff report, Mr. Bassey's laid out in the staff report very, very accurately. This is a consistency zone change case. This project, and as modified, and with regard to the modifications, all the modifications have been a lessening of impact. Everything we have done has been done to lessen that impact. So I think, and in looking at the CEQA letter that was submitted by Ms. Bridges, we feel very comfortable that all the issues in consultation with Mr. Stark, who prepared the environmental document, Mr. Bassey, Mr. Jackson, and my applicant, that we are comfortable with moving forward, that we feel that we have more than adequate documentation on each and all of those points, and that nothing has been overlooked. And one thing I did apologize. Ms. Miller's contention is somehow that AB 52 had not been followed. Your staff did the consultation with the Pechanga tribe on AB 52. We did archaeological studies on this, and basically that has all been vetted with the tribe. And we have the standard monitoring conditions that we will go through where they will monitor. We will have our archaeologists monitor as well, and all the standard conditions of approval. So I think any contention to that level is not accurate. And basically, I think that really sums up everything. I think your staff report lays out that we are consistent with the development code, consistent with the general plan, we're consistent with the zoning as proposed, and thus we would request your approval. We're really not in a position at this late date, I'm notwithstanding Mr. Bennett's request, that we really do want to move forward with the project tonight with your concurrence, and we would request your favorable approval of the project. And happy to answer any questions. And we have our entire team here to answer questions as well.
Okay. Anyone have questions?
Larry, thank you. I feel like you literally hit every wicket that I would have touched upon or asked about, and I have no questions for you.
I purposely had not seen any of the project until tonight. I didn't want to be biased. I wanted to see what they had done. There have been so many changes. My planning commissioner actually voted against this project, and I've talked with her to try to find out why, or her reasoning, what she was thinking, and we had a good conversation about it. I've known Larry for years. That's not affecting my vote or what I think here. I will explain some things later. But I have no questions of the project at this time. It was laid out very well. The changes they've made look good. So no questions from me.
Okay. Bridget?
So when you met the residents last night, what was their feeling after the meeting?
We met with Mr. Kinsey and his wife and talked about their specific, that was our last meeting last night, about his specific issues with regard to the specific views, and we actually brought Mr. Valdez, and he went through his computer generation views of that, and also looked at how literally you can digitally go in and basically put a person in that upstairs window, if you will. And we looked at the views with the plantings as the trees would be planted, as they would be grow in, and as you've heard from Mr. Leonardo, you'll get about 2 feet of growth, vertical and horizontal growth a year. It pretty much, if the digital representation, we stand by our digital representation, that they basically, with that, they will not be able to see into their windows. But the one thing that did come out of that, and I discussed with Mr. Lowe and Mr. Valdez after it, I came up with the idea of doing a upfront initial construction visual screen that we could put in there and leave there until such time as it was deemed that the trees had grown in to provide the screen on our side of the wall that would screen those units. So it was sort of a belt and suspenders, and also what it did was we did hear from a couple of residents, a couple other couples, that they were concerned about the view of construction workers, and this should take care of that construction worker issue too, because basically if we put it in at the front end of the project, and we're happy to accept a condition to that effect, even other than the folks putting literally the poles and the foundations for the poles and the wire and the mesh in, they would be the only ones that would be in or that would be able to see anything until after that screen is put in. So that actually, Mr. Kinsey's, that somewhat triggered that particular additional mitigation measure.
Was the feeling that the residents were okay then with the project? Sounds like
They continue to be, no, there's no question. The residents next door have basically said, I mean, several have even said they would prefer the no project alternative, nothing be built, that they continue to look at what's out there today. And there's others that say, well, we would prefer a single-family residential project and actually asked us to make the units that 1 through 10 buildings as single-family homes. And that's, number one, that's not consistent with your general plan. Number two, we can't really break the project up into 2 pieces like that. Third, the grading, and I didn't touch on the grading, I will. The grading for the project is going to be pretty much the same whether it's a single-family project or a multifamily or a townhome project. It really won't be much different. We've incorporated the city's capital improvement project design for Jefferson, Palomar on the grades and horizontal alignments. Same way with Washington. So basically, those 2 sides of the project are fixed. And then with the entry, which the entry on Palomar is fixed by the entry into the roads track in the church street across the west side. And then we have to have secondary access for fire purposes. And so as a result, we have to connect to Palomar Jefferson. And then we have to look at it, and there you have specific requirements about how steep that can coming up from Palomar, and how steep that can come down coming from Palomar Jefferson. And then we have to make ADA access work both to the public streets and internally. And all that being said, there's really not a whole lot of variability to this site from a grading perspective. And if it were a single-family project, it would really be appreciably the same. And we've even had to put in some retaining walls in the perimeter in a couple places to make it work with the streets. Also, we balance the site, and specifically, we always try to balance sites so we're not importing or exporting dirt, because that's a very noisy and usually not desirable occurrence. We were basically said, we were basically told, well, you're doing that to save money. Hauling dirt off costs money, hauling dirt in costs money, balancing on site is the logical way to do it to minimize the off-site impacts. And so that's what we did that's what Mr. Valdez did with his design. So there's really not a whole lot of variability to it from that point of the grading standpoint. So.
Okay, so I traveled around and went through Jefferson, went through Grizzly Ridge and all through the track, and actually one thing I was surprised was with the big white fence at the end of the cul-de-sac. It's kind of like, seemed odd to me, but okay.
Well, we actually, during the community meetings and the first planning commission hearing, there was a resident that very vehemently claimed that we hadn't maintained that fence. I think we all thought that it was actually within a road right of way. It was built by the developer that built the project to the south, because he owned this property at one time too, and was going to continue on with some sort of project. And basically, he had a wood fence there. We commissioned having that fence torn out and a new fence. The wood fence was pretty dilapidated. There is actually no dedication for that road. In theory, I guess we could fence across it if we wanted to at the very end boundary, but from day one, we said we would maintain it and keep it there for the fire turnaround purposes. We built that new fence specifically in response to those folks. We went in and in response to those earlier comments, they said, well, there's trash on the site. We went in and had a company come in and clean up the site, because there were some homeless people that had been on the site. We also went in and had weed abatement done around the perimeter of the property, which had not been done recently. And with the winter rains, it had grown up pretty good. So we weed abated around the entire perimeter. We also went in and put up no trespassing, no dumping signs, and per state code around the perimeter, so that anybody could basically call the sheriff's department or your police and have somebody arrested for trespassing, arrested for dumping if they see them. Those signs we had put in, and then the last thing we just haven't had the opportunity to get it done is to put in some sort of a barrier to keep the contractors, which is typically pool and landscape contractors, from coming onto the site and dumping. We will be putting in either concrete K-rails or behind the property line down along Palomar. There's a couple other places up in the north, up in the upper end. So those pickup trucks and those dump trucks can't get onto the site to dump. And that's the one thing we just haven't gotten done yet. So.
Okay, so when I was on Jefferson, and then it forces you to make the left onto Grizzly Ridge, to me it seemed like that would be a cut through. So residents who are on Jefferson now cut through Grizzly Ridge. It's a downhill slope, and then they get out to Washington, which turns into Palomar. So having Jefferson go through, to me, seemed like that would actually make Grizzly Ridge safer because you wouldn't have that cut through and that traffic going in a downhill speed with kids in the area, because now those go through Jefferson. So to me, it's like to make Grizzly Ridge safer. So for the traffic, the T intersection with just stop signs, that's what's proposed.
The traffic study right now does not warrant a signal. And so we, at the last hearing, at the planning commission hearing, rather, second planning commission hearing, Mr. York proposed a condition that we pay we had actually offered to design a signal, but because of the possible longer lead time of having to get put in, he preferred to have us pay our pro rata fair share of that signal, and we concurred with that condition. So
I'd actually like to have a signal. Just so about a couple months ago, we were reviewing a project on Bundy County that also didn't have a signal, and I just don't see having one. No one's ever had to stop there, so that's already going to be a big change of residents having to stop, and then to have three-way come in. I picture the stack up, especially if the sycamore gets out, to be very long. So I think, even though I know it doesn't warrant a signal, I think a signal is needed.
one thing I think you'll notice on Mr. Evatt's presentation, the traffic on Washington drops from about 9,000 cars down to I believe about 4,000 cars once Jefferson's connected, because basically what will happen is a lot of the traffic that's on Washington today will now enter and exit the city on the Palomar Jefferson corridor and not on Washington.
Right. I still think a signal there too, like I said, because they're not going to be used to even stopping at all, and then they're going to be stopping and not making full stops, and then running the stops, and then we're going to have complaints about that.
Public Works Department.
Yeah, no, I still think a signal's needed. So I live in Choctaw, and my neighbors can see in my backyard, both my neighbors, and I can see in both my neighbors' backyard. So if you live in Choctaw, that's what it is. When you're on Jefferson, on Grandview, Grandview looms over the neighbors right across Jefferson, and they can see them in their backyards. And I don't know if Grandview's considered part of Grizzly Ridge, but I drove up and down that street. How far is the distance? So that got brought up. Is it half mile
I'm sorry?
from the project to Clinton Keith? What is that, half mile, 3/4 mile?
Rich, do you have an idea off the top of your head? Probably 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile?
I'd say it's closer to a mile.
Yeah.
I would guess.
Somewhere close to that, I think.
There is one
Yeah,
stop
so I
sign.
mean, I consider that close to shopping centers right there, Rite Aid's right there. It's very close to services. So the green wall, if there is maintenance needed, graffiti, or it gets torn, or the wind blows it down, or to me it sounds like it's a big curtain. You're just going to put a big curtain up to protect everyone from seeing this project being built. Who's going to take care of that?
The homeowner association will. That'll be an HOA maintained facility.
So there was a reference to the cultural resource, which I know is 110 pages, and you contacted 17 tribes.
Yes, well, actually, your staff, that's an interagency, or it's government to government, technically, and Pechanga is deemed to be a government. So that actually takes place between your staff and the Pechanga.
I saw the letters,
staff. Yeah.
right, so
We
all
provide
the tribes were
reports.
contacted.
Yes.
So RTA, I was kind of curious, so we did send the plans to them, correct? I'm surprised RTA didn't weigh
I
in.
think you transmit all your projects to the RTA.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a route, but I'm just so surprised they just didn't weigh in at all with some sort of letter.
No, I don't matter, Dan, I don't recall seeing anything.
Okay.
We usually, if they make requests, and usually the requests get forwarded to us, then we work with staff on whether or not the city wants to see the request honored or not, so.
Okay,
Did it?
those are my questions, yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I actually got one more. So Larry, at one point, I thought you had mentioned this, maybe I missed it, but we're not having the last unit on the end, right? So is that depicted in this?
Yeah, what you have in your staff report is the revised version that has the end units removed.
It does that in your,
Yeah.
okay.
But our setbacks went from about 30 feet in the second planning commission version up to about 40, 45 to, I think it's 46 to 52 feet. And now by moving buildings 1 and 2 back another 4 and 2 feet respectively, it actually jumps up to right at 50 to 52 feet on everything. So
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.